The League is dead. Long live the United Nations.
It was, they said, the war for democracy, the war to end all war. After 4 years of Holocaust and torment, the world was screaming out its revulsion to war. The casualty figures after a major battle would look like the population statistic for a large city. An entire generation of Europe's youth was wiped out. It was parade's end, wrote Ford Madox Ford. And there were to be no more parades. After 4 years of Holocaust and torment, the world was screaming out its revulsion to war.
February 1945. President Roosevelt journeys to Yalta to meet with Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. They discuss the fate of Europe when Germany is defeated. Stalin promises to participate in the formation of a new world organization, the United Nations.
100 million men had been called to the armies in World War II. But now, the boys were coming home. For the second time this century, we gave thanks that the war was over and that the nations would practice war no more.
The United Nations was established in 1945 with the signatory of 50 countries for the express purpose of preventing the outbreak of war and averting a world war. The United Nations has many parts to it. It deals, for instance, with matters of economics and social policy. It deals with matters of human rights. It deals with matters of culture. But the most important parts of the UN are the Security Council, which has 5 permanent members who are responsible for controlling its policy. These are France, Britain, the United States, China, and Russia. The other body that is very important is where all the nations meet and come together, and that is the General Assembly. Both the General Assembly and the Security Council pass what are called resolutions to make policy for the world. The UN has been responsible for eradicating polio in Africa, for instance, of dealing with problems of debt or problems of other diseases spreading. The UN has been very important in making sure that human rights are observed. The most famous document is the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which has been ratified and kept by many countries. The UN, precisely because it's so complex, is determined to make sure that everything is done towards a big picture of peace and trying to make sure that humanity attains the primary purpose of what it says, that we believe. We believe in a better future.
Now we're in a far worse position than we were a year ago. 10 times as many refugees outside Syria as there were a year ago. The situation is deteriorating. It gets worse every day, and the world has to do something about it.
The strongest storm to ever strike a land mass where people live. The scale is epic.
What we are seeing is basically a reaction to violence, using violence to react to violence.
The rights of children and women need to be respected, and they're not being respected.
Your heart breaks because the last thing people want to do is leave their homes.
Even in the face of tremendous destruction, the changing nature of conflict, we are able to do something.
We have to keep our eyes on all ages.
The way to accelerate the end of female genital mutilation cutting is by taking into account the social realities of the practice.
Make the invisible visible. Help us make violence against children disappear. When children with disabilities are not counted, they do not count.
Our message today is not that children need education even in emergencies. It's that children need education especially in emergencies.
The leading economists of the world have consistently found that investing in children and early childhood is by far the most cost-effective interventions a country can make.
We really tackle the HIV like we are in a war. We are going to fight with the little that we have, because saving the children was to save the nation.
Operations, diplomacy, and humanitarian capacities have been pushed to the limit. More than 100 million people need assistance, and more than 50 million people have been driven from their homes, the most since the Second World War.
The Rwandan genocide of 1994 is one example where the UN was condemned for failing to step in. George W. Bush's Iraq War is also considered by many the result of inaction on the part of the United Nations. While to some the UN has outlived its relevancy, to others it's an indispensable organization. There is no denying that the United Nations has served a valuable purpose over the course of its history.